Astros have the winning run on with nobody out. Walker 2 for 4 with an RBI single.
Hit deep to left field. Ball game. Christian Walker walks it off, and the Astros win it and take 3 out of 4 from the Seattle Mariners.
That's the one Christian Walker wanted.
And that's hammered down the left field line in deep and go! Christian Walker wins it! A walk-off 2-run homer! 5-3 Houston!
Good afternoon. We are recording this a little bit later on Memorial Day. This is Off Day with Ballpark Nation. With me, as always, is Andy Tom Chesson. Andy, first of all, the first official day of summer, one way to view Memorial Day. I hope you're at least getting some summer at home back there in Houston, Texas.
I stick to the Gregorian calendar, so I'm good until the 21st. It's raining here because it's Houston, but a little pool time Saturday and Sunday.
Nice.
There was meat smoked, which is not it's the commentary on my social life, or maybe it is. I don't know.
Well, and I did what many Americans do on Memorial Day, and I went to the movies, and we'll get to that in a minute. But of course, obviously, before we jump into this, Memorial Day is one of those holidays. It's not really a happy day. So thinking about everybody who has lost somebody or those lost in service to this country.
Unless you're our president, in which case you get on Twitter and wish people a happy Memorial Day and then call them scum.
I haven't seen that yet. Oh, great.
Oh, it's great. You'll enjoy it. I highly recommend.
Man, I can't.
He's a statesman.
He's a statesman. He's a statesman. But a couple things to talk about. First of all, yes, I am wearing my SEC rowing championship t-shirt because I know we're not supposed to care about water sports. Speaking of our president, water sports.
I mean, depending on which Russian story you want to follow, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. But the NCAA Division I baseball tournament schedule is out. As you predicted before the SEC tournament, Texas does have an 8 national seed, number 2 overall, with Vanderbilt getting the number 1, which means the best part about the tournament, they're playing Houston Christian, Kansas State, and UTSA. And boy, Andy, if this were football, I'd be a lot more worried about Kansas State versus Texas, but it isn't. So there's that. But the one thing about the bracket, Andy, that I first noticed is the 15th seed who they would match up with in the super regional does not have an SEC team in it, which to me feels like a blessing, in my opinion.
I mean, it would be the path of least resistance should it work out the way it's going to. But again, it's baseball. And let assume you win your regional, which I think your biggest challenge is UTSA in that draw, which they'll be competitive. I'll say that about University of Texas. I'll say that about the Roadrunners. But then if everything falls the way you expect it to, you're hosting. Anything can happen in a 3-game series, as we've seen. But it certainly puts Texas in a really good position to make it to Omaha for the 3rd time in 5 years.
Yeah. That's the thing. So hopefully, you get there, and I'll be honest. I've been pretty upfront about what I thought about the team. I don't know what the ceiling is. Even Schloss kind of Freudian slipped a little bit in when he was being interviewed by ESPN about how the offense will get better when it gets his guys in there. So I don't know. I think everything that Texas gets out of this season from what it was supposed to do coming in is kind of just gravy.
Yeah, I mean, you're ahead of the development curve for sure. I think the pitching staff that Slosh inherited was better than he thought it was, and certainly Max Weiner had a big piece to do with developing those guys more than David Pierce had developed those guys. And I say that as a former St. Pius alumni or fellow St. Pius alumni with Coach Pierce. Wish him well. But when he took on the role as pitching coach as well as head coach last year or the year before last, that did not spell great things for his future. And you kind of saw how that played out.
Yeah.
Max Weiner has done a very good job with the pitching staff. The additions through the portal were smart. So it just, you're a year ahead. So I don't disagree with you. Anything that happens this year to the positive is just gravy at this point.
Yeah, just gravy. Now, one of the cool things about fate and about how things sometimes works out is that yesterday was Star Wars Day at Minute Maid Park. Star Wars weekend, even they've embraced it.
It was. I saw the
Yeah.
Friday night version.
I was at the Saturday night version. A guy with the last name Walker walked off the Mariners. Let's start first of all with the series in general. I was going to apply the same standard I had for the Astros at Rangers. A split on the road is a win for the road team. A split at home is a loss for the home team. The Astros ended up winning that series 3-1 and now are a scant game and a half behind the Seattle Mariners. And they did it in a couple of different ways, including Christian Walker, I think, having to feel all the weight of the world off of his shoulders with that walk-off.
Sure. Before we get to that, I'd even argue that the Astros probably should have swept that 4-game series if Brian Abreu could realize that Cal Raleigh only hits sliders really hard and stop throwing him sliders.
Well, let's go a step further. They have played the Mariners 7 times and Brian Abreu, despite what the box score will tell you, lost all 3 of those games.
Yeah. The Astros have had the lead in all 7 of the games in the 7th inning that they've played against the Mariners so far, and we're 4-3 right now. That's with going 3-1 this weekend. So the Mariners are a good team. They pitch well. They still don't hit appreciably well. So they, have been better, I think, under Dan Wilson than they were under Scott Service of taking advantage of other teams' mistakes. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of the next piece of the evolution of a team. You've got good pitching. You've got some decent guys in your lineup, not really putting together the offensive display that you would expect from a contender like they keep telling everybody they are, but they don't beat themselves a lot, which, good for them. As Ben Verlander said on X or Twitter this week, the reason the Astros are in his power rankings ahead of the Mariners is because until somebody beats the Astros, this is still the Astros division. And it hasn't happened in 7 full seasons. So Seattle can squawk all they want. And there has been a lot of crying from the very few handful of Mariners fans who elected to stay on social media after yesterday's game. It's amazing how quiet they got overnight. It's almost like they all lost their accounts or something.
Real quiet overnight. One of the things that had that was kind of the recurring theme of the game was Brian McTaggart was keeping track of it. It was like 19 straight hits were singles, and then 20, and then 21. That number might have even gotten to 22. But to me, I'm looking at it from the perspective of they're hitting the ball, they're getting on base, and all of these other things are going to eventually fall their way. And in fact, in that game, they did. Yeah, it was still frustrating. They still could have won that game in the 7th or the 8th inning. But to me, I feel like the offense, I think we're still dealing with a little bit of emotional damage from the previous early season struggles with that.
100%. There are some of our fan base that's still dealing with the emotional struggles of Jose Abreu playing first. So it's especially important for a guy like Christian Walker to start having those moments, especially with the continued absence of Yordan Alvarez, who I can't even tell what the Astros are telling us anymore. Is he coming back for the A's series? Is he just making progress? Friday, he was in a good place, but wasn't activated for the weekend, but he was running bases, which has nothing to do with how his hand is, but he hit against a machine, which is great, but there is no clear message or a timetable on Yordan Alvarez, and he's been out long enough now that I would kind of expect he should get a rehab start or 2 in the minors. I don't know if they're going to make him do that, but that's kind of how I would handle that at this point. But we've been saying all along that when Walker and Alvarez start hitting, this offense is going to start scoring those runs right now that they're leaving at second and third base. It is somewhat a symptom of roster construction, but it's also a symptom of, I think, a lot of bad luck. It is really, really hard to get, 11 hits on Saturday and only score 2 runs. That's really difficult to do. The Astros managed to do it because, to McTaggart's point, it was a lot of singles, but those weren't necessarily cheap singles. And you have a lot of guys hitting the ball hard, but right at guys. And Christian Walker being one of those guys, he lined out to somebody Saturday hitting the ball 106 miles an hour, but it was a ground ball. So he will start elevating those pitches. I think you saw it. He got his opportunity, and Seattle, gave him a great pitch to hit. He did what he was supposed to do with it. And I would argue that, there's a couple guys on our roster paid to be heroes in situations like that. And Jose Altuve was on base. He's one of them, and Christian Walker knocked him in. He's the other one. So the plan worked yesterday, and the plan worked for the series against the Mariners. And now they need to jump on a struggling Las Vegas team that is coming in reeling a little bit after being competitive a lot longer into the season than people were thinking they were going to be.
Yeah, they're sliding, but I'm also glad they had a long losing streak, but I'm also kind of glad that they broke that streak.
Yeah.
That way they don't break it tomorrow. And look, I'll be the first to admit it. There were two, I'm not going to call them managerial choices. I'll call them managerial / front office choices that could have stung the Astros this weekend. Using Hader in a loss could have been problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And then using Brown on the last day of the Rays series, which made him unavailable for the Mariners series, which was arguably more important. But I guess no harm, no foul if those decisions don't actually affect you.
Results-wise, I don't think there was any issue. I do have concern, and again, we've talked about this all season and part of last season, is Joe Espada seems to have learned bullpen management from Dusty Baker. That's not a compliment. And so we fall in love with guys, and then we completely forget about guys. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, you do weird things like pitching Hader with a 2-run deficit for no apparent reason other than, I just pitched Abreu. Hader pitches after Abreu. You're carrying Caleb Orr. You're carrying 5 other guys literally that should be pitching in those situations before you get to Hader. And it's just the weird fixation on using him in games that don't really meet the profile of when you need him, especially knowing you've got 2 more games after this in the series that you'd like him available for. It worked out for him, but it's weird that Mariners fans were mad at Wilson for not putting Munoz in yesterday, and Astros fans are mad at Espada for using Hader too much. So, I guess there's balance somewhere. I'd like, to clean up our side of that ledger a little bit, though, and start using Hader when it makes sense to use Hader, and using Abreu when it makes sense to use Abreu, and using the other guys a little bit more.
Yeah, the same argument too, man, applies to using Hader when it's a 4-run situation. Like I get that in September, but in April and in May, you don't want him to lose his effectiveness in August and September because you've used him too much now. It goes against the concept of it's a long season.
Well, I think you've got the situation with Hader that we saw him wear out at the end of last season when he was being used a lot. You also have the situation where you're not developing anybody else in that bullpen if you're not giving them the opportunities to pitch in tight situations late in games. When you're trailing, when you're up by just out of save range. Because somebody on this roster might have to close a game when Abreu and Hader aren't available. Right now, last year we had the luxury of having Presley and having a couple of other guys who had actually saved major league games on the roster. We don't have that this year. I don't think there's anybody that has a major league save that's currently in the bullpen. Caleb Ort may have picked up one in his life somewhere I'm not aware of, but it's not that any of them have been even a part-time closer at any level of Major League Baseball to this point. And at some point, you're going to need a guy who can do that. And I think that's one of the things that concerns me with Espada. And a little bit personnel, a little injury. We haven't yet established that 7th inning guy.
Yeah. And you've got a couple of good options there, people that are developing like Okert and Brad King. But you're right. We don't have that guy yet. I'm still hopeful that Whitley can be that guy. But, Whitley could have easily pitched in that game they were losing and seen if what had happened.
Against Tampa.
Yeah, he had the bad game against Tampa, but we could have seen it was that rust, or has he lost something? So there would have been a good opportunity to use a guy who hadn't been used in 4 games.
Yeah, and let him air it out against a team that has proven not to be able to handle fastballs really well.
Well, what do you make of the Rangers collapse, other than it's funny?
I mean, karma's going to get you. The Rangers going into the season, I think I said on our little preview show that they're a flawed team and that they're still banking on 2022 happening or 2023 happening again, where everybody on their roster is going to have a career season, and that means they're going to win games. They've got 1-2 good starting pitchers, and then the rest of the rotation is pretty much garbage. And I know that I'm saying that watching Jack Leiter no hit us for 7 innings, but he's not. That's not him. He's more the guy with the 4.5 ERA.
Right.
Their offense is spotty at best. They're still hoping that Adolis Garcia is going to hit like he did before he started having a lot of eyeballs on him. You can make of that what you will. They're still hoping that their second baseman is going to be an all-star again instead of a 35-year-old who is very rapidly declining. Josh Young is a bright spot. I think Wyatt Langford is a guy who is getting better the more he plays. But they've got a lot of other holes and guys that I think, they've got some emotional investment in that maybe isn't deserved at this point. And then Mr. Pearls, I guess, broke his hand this week. So their big off-season offensive acquisition in Jock Peterson is not going to be playing with them for a while.
Yeah.
Couldn't happen to a nicer franchise.
Yeah, I mean, in all this is happening in the midst of DeGrom having a career year, and for him, that's a big deal. I mean,
But even the thing with DeGrom, I know talent level wise, he's your ace, but Evaldi is available all year long most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's the guy I would hang my hat on, because DeGrom literally can pitch Cy Young level baseball for 3 starts in a row and then hurt himself and be gone for the rest of the year. And that's not wishful thinking on my part. I don't wish him injuries, but that's his history.
That's his history.
He'll go great, and then he'll just be gone.
I will say, I found the Red Sox medical staff to be pretty refreshing when they admitted that the strained quad that Bregman has, he's going to be out for, they're saying, at least 3 months.
Yep.
But I hate to say, like, this is why you don't sign big contracts to guys, but this is why you don't sign big contracts to guys. And it's not as if, soft tissue injuries, which he has had several of, I think you're prone to them or you aren't. And I think he's prone to them.
Yeah. And he has avoided them. To be fair, he avoided them in 23 and 24. I think the last time
the bad one in 22 was his quad. Then he had a hammy the year before that.
Yeah. But there was a 3-year stretch where he was going to miss significant time with a leg injury. And I don't think that goes away. And I think part of that's just how Bregman works out, and that he's the kind of guy who's constantly pushing himself. There used to be a thought process that you didn't want to get too bulked up to be a baseball player, because you wanted to be limber and pliable and to be able to handle the rigors of a 162 game season, and hopefully the playoffs behind that. That kind of went away in the 80s, and then in the 90s, especially when we discovered needles. Everybody but Bud Selig discovered needles.
Everybody. Yeah.
He did not realize there were needles until 2 weeks ago. Now they take the pep pills and it's fine. That's what we did in my day. But I think you see some of these more soft tissue injuries that become more, career threatening, or at least season threatening, because guys work out the way they do. And that's not to say they shouldn't work out. That's not to say that they shouldn't get as strong as they possibly can. But I think flexibility is a much bigger tool for a baseball player than being Mark McGwire.
Well, and it's honestly too, it's not unrelated to the problems that we have with pitchers, where, they are also strengthening parts of their bodies, but parts of the other bodies don't get strengthened. And that's why you see all these arm injuries that come with increased velo and with increased spin. It's just, you're doing things the body doesn't necessarily want you to do. And when you get that bulked up, everything gets stronger except for the things that hold your body together.
Yeah, and I'm probably talking out of my ass here a little bit, but I'm guessing that if your big desire as an offensive player in today's Major League Baseball is launch angle, you are working out towards that goal. And I don't know, and I've said this before on the show too, and this is evidently my line today. Watch the documentary about the '86 Mets, and that's an entire team that's a really good offensive team, but you would not recognize what they're doing at the plate as baseball if you only watched the last couple of years of Major League Baseball. Choking, got power hitters, Darryl Strawberry choking up on a bat, taking a ball the other way, not worrying about launch angle. And Strawberry was maybe the premier power hitter for a couple of seasons.
Yeah.
But that was an entire team of guys that scored a lot of runs, but did it in vastly different ways than teams do it today. And I think part of that is the exercise regimens, technology they have, the two true outcome baseball that we have decided that we want to play as a national product, that I think the two things go hand in hand.
Yeah. And I think, obviously you want him back on the field. I don't wish any ill to him, but
No.
it just seems like, that's a thing that can happen. I worry about Alvarez's long-term. Like, I wouldn't give Alvarez an extension.
No, I think it's safe to say that Alvarez is a injury-prone player at this point.
I mean, it's literally a strained hand muscle.
Yeah, and this is not the first time that he's strained a hand muscle.
Maybe he needs Correa's masseuse.
I don't think Correa's masseuse works anymore unless you pay by the hour.
Yeah, well, it's probably fair. I want to talk a little Aggie baseball, whether
no,
or not.
You didn't put my title up today.
Oh, I need to put your title up for everybody. I don't know how that happened. Let's get to that. Once I find out where I'm supposed to do that at. I want to get it up. But you did not. Here we go. D1 looking for head coach, inquire within. All right, so I guess that tells me what your thought is. They officially did not make the tournament. Do you think Early is going to be gone early?
My personal opinion is yes. Kendall Rogers from D1 Baseball expects movements in this job sooner rather than later. He expects there to be a significant hire, and I don't know what that means exactly or who that means. I have my guess. The message boards, the internet seem to think it's going to be Rob Vaughn from Alabama or O'Connor from Virginia, which was the other team that was in the top two of the D1 preseason rankings that did not make the NCAA tournament this year. At least O'Connor has skins on the wall. He has won a national championship. He has won a bunch of ACC titles. He could legitimately say it was an off year. I think Early, there's a world where Early gets to second year, and I still think Early is going to be a really good coach for somebody down the road. But I think the amount of injuries that this team had, coupled with him learning to be a head coach at an SEC school on the job, proved just to be too much for him. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't have a good sense of how this season is affecting his ability to recruit. It's really hard to tell with baseball too, because you get a lot of teams that promote this idea that, hey, we signed this guy, but this guy is probably going to be a top three round pick in Major League Baseball. So he's probably never making it to campus, but we get the, privilege of saying we would have signed him if he didn't go pro. Yeah. Well, so it's hard to say that he's recruiting well, because I think he's got some guys signed that look really good, but they all could be in the MLB draft instead. So I don't know what – I do know that banking on keeping a roster together, and that's the reason you hire a coach, is probably not the right move. And that's what A&M did. And they tried. They shot their shot. It didn't work. And I don't think if Early is gone, there's not going to be regrets. And I know there's a portion of our fan base who's ready to burn the whole thing to the ground, and that has more to do with football than it does with baseball results, frankly. Because like men's basketball, a lot of our fans tune in for tournament time.
Yeah.
It's the same group of people who are really aggravated at Trish Ford and how badly she managed the softball series, but hadn't watched a softball game the entire season up until that point. So I don't give them a lot of thought, but it is certainly a vocal part of our fan base, and kind of a gross part of our fan base, frankly. And it all started this year when Elko made the mistake of going 7-1 and then dropping his last 5 games, or 4 of his last 5 games. It set a tone for the rest of the year, and I think a lot of hopes got put on baseball is going to save us, and baseball didn't save us. So, but I think it's an attractive job. It is certainly a job that you can win at, and if the position comes open, I don't think it's going to be a long, hard. I don't think it's going to be hard to fill, and I don't think it's going to be hard to fill with a guy that on paper at least looks like an upgrade.
What are your thoughts on Mike Elko's sort of rhetoric after summer camp is over? He's pretty bullish on the Aggies this season coming up.
Well, I mean, I hope he is.
His job to be, but yeah.
The things that I trust Mike Elko on implicitly are defense, and if he says the defense looks good, he's not going to lie about that. He will be. We'll see if this works for him, because it hasn't worked for offensive coordinators doing the same thing. He will be calling defensive sets and handling the defensive play calling, such as it is next year. That lets the coaches under him focus a little bit more on technique. That means I think we're going to see much improved safety play, because that's where he made his bread and butter early in his career. The offense is still to be determined. Got to find out what Marcel Reed's ceiling is, and can he throw the ball consistently to have linebackers in your front 7 back off him a little bit. Because if that happens, then I think he's going to be a really big asset for A&M. But our fan base being what it is, we're already calling for the backup who had a better spring game, because spring games are fully important. I think what I am encouraged about offensively, though, and that Elko seems to be encouraged about, at least what he's saying at the coaches' nights, is the offensive line looks really good compared to last year. So he feels they've made a leap, and they're going to be playing together, which is not something A&M has had. You've had a lot of kind of moving parts in that offensive line,
right?
And you're bringing back a lot of starts, so that should be helpful for a young quarterback. And the running back stable should be really, really good, provided everybody stays healthy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that sounds good. Now, there was another big competition this week, and that was between Tom Cruise and Lilo and Stitch. And Lilo and Stitch destroyed Mission Impossible. And it's funny because and that's not to say that Mission Impossible did poorly, because it actually was set a record for that franchise's opening.
Yep.
It was just a banner year for movies. Lilo and Stitch beat the Top Gun Maverick record from a couple of years ago.
But Disney, I'm not talking about Disney Marvel or Disney Star Wars. Disney on a holiday weekend with even though it was live action, with a animated character that has a history.
Why did you not move your release date?
I mean, that's the football program for a major college. It's paying for everything else Disney wants to do this year.
Yeah. I don't know how you saw that, because they put these things on there years in advance. How did you not?
Yep.
How did you not move it 2 weeks earlier? And what's interesting is because they made the same with the Mission Impossible franchise. They made the same mistake last year by only allowing 1 week before last film before Barbenheimer. Mm-hmm. And so then, the movie was a pretty poorly performing. I will say I've seen the film. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I will say that I'm referring it to as Meh-ssion Impossible. And you got to understand, Andy, I love this franchise.
I know that you do.
I love it. And I would rank these last two somewhere in the bottom, somewhere maybe still above Mission Impossible 2. But the thing is, they did it. They did their best to make it long. They did their best to make it boring. They did their best to make it humorless. There's 0 laughs in the movie. And the 2 big set pieces are super impressive, but they did a really good job of undercutting how impressive they were with other cinematic elements at play.
Was there a lot of unnecessary exposition?
There's full on an hour of unnecessary exposition with including
Great.
flashbacks to the movie we already saw. Like, and there's a couple of other storytelling things. And when you get to see it, I'm curious, but they did a lot of unnecessarily retconning. And this is what happens when you retcon. One, it's unnecessary. We don't need to know. Just like we didn't need to know exactly how Darth Vader became Darth Vader. We didn't really need to know.
George Lucas.
Yeah. We didn't really need to know exactly what happened to why Ethan ended up being recruited in the IMF. But there was all of this like unnecessary retconning that also added to the unnecessary exposition that just, I mean, there's literally scenes where people are just talking plot, and you can tell even the filmmakers knew they were boring because they tried to cover it up with unnecessarily frantic editing choices.
It'll be interesting to see. I haven't seen it yet. I plan to see it at some point this week. If I have a few extra, 3 hours
on the dot. By the way, kudos to the Movie House and Eatery for running out of soda.
Soda's hard to run out of.
Yeah,
they come in big boxes that you.
We ate our breakfast when we got there, and then we brought our popcorn out 1 hour into the movie with what we thought was our refills of Diet Coke and Jessica's Icy, and there were no refills. So not only was the movie boring, but we were
great. I do think that part of the problem is that it is really, really hard to pull off a finale to a series. I think it just is. I am certain you're not wrong, and there are things they could have done better and more creatively and more expeditiously, maybe cut it down to 2.5, whatever. But I think one of the reasons that you and I maintain a list of our favorite finales, whether it's TV or movies, of a franchise, is that the ones that really hit, really, really hit. The ones that don't,
really don't.
And there's very few that are just kind of, it was okay. So I think that may be part of it. And I think Cruise probably at some level doesn't really want to let that franchise go.
Well, that's the thing to me, Andy, is like this franchise is not, well, okay. So let's look at it from the perspective of, because James Bond, in my opinion, also swung and missed with the final 2 Craig films, because you're trying to do something that the franchise didn't need. These franchises at their best are episodic installments anyway. If there's another one, cool. If not, it doesn't rely on the story. Like, whereas the Jason Bourne movies, there was definitely a through line for 3 movies. Yeah. And so you're trying to get us to care, and then they didn't stick the landing. And I'll just say, I don't talk too much about it because of spoilers, although there's really nothing to spoil. The one thing about these last 2 movies is they were so meandering. I'm not sure what the hell happened plot wise anyway. Like, it's so unnecessarily convoluted. But just to say that, I think they wanted us to have this emotional reaction that we just didn't have. Top Gun Maverick was much more of an emotional home run than either of these last 2. And I think they wanted us to feel the same thing.
Without spoiling anything, does Tom Cruise run?
Oh, there's lots of running.
Well, that's important.
He runs everywhere. He runs, he swims. There's a lot of swimming.
Good.
Yeah, a lot of swimming.
Well, I know I introduced him to an electric bike. I got one in the garage. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's
I can get mine up to about 30 miles an hour. It's nice.
But I think the thing, so I go back to my indie film days, and I could always tell that a filmmaker sucked when the thing they would want to bring up was whatever technical achievement, and usually a new camera. Oh my God, I shot it on this. And if that's the first thing you're saying, well, then that means there's no substance. And these last 2 movies in particular, maybe even the last 3, if I go back and rewatch Fallout, it really is scene, stunt. And the stunt has become the story as opposed to the stunt servicing the story. And these last two movies actually went well into production without a script. With Dead Reckoning, they didn't know where that train jump was going to fall in the plot when they shot the train part, the jump part. They just shot it, and then they worked it in later on.
To that point, so I watched Dead Reckoning earlier this week because I am at some point going to go see this movie, and it was, in theory, part 2 of this movie. I had to be reminded of the whole Vanessa Kirby in the train fake mask thing for a diamond, I believe, because the only thing I remember from watching the film was him desperately trying to get on a train and then missing the train and having to run some more to get on the train and then riding a bike to finally land on the train so you have a fight on the train.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if I'm identifying it, I'm not identifying it as Dead Reckoning. I'm in the one with the train.
Yeah, and Fallout's the one where he's on the side of the plane. I mean, that's that's what it's become. And it's lost. I'll say after the fourth film, it started to drastically lose its a sense of humor. Like even at the train jump in the last one, it's still funny because Benji's the one whose idea it was.
Right.
Just jump on the plane and how stressed he was. But you get none of that in this new movie. But in the opening of Ghost Protocol, which was the fourth one, which I really, really like, you don't have a big stunt. You've got that very funny prison break scene set to Ain't That a Kick in the Head by Tony Bennett. Dean Martin. But none of that personality exists once Christopher McQuarrie took over and it became just about the stunt.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate because it is, especially early on. Well, let's put that 1 and 3 are a lot of fun. 4 was a lot of fun. 2 was everybody's got their problems with 2.
Yeah. Although the girl's a smoke show in the movie.
Yeah, but that's the easy part.
Yeah,
that's like saying I went to see the Bond movie because of the female lead.
Yeah. I will say this though, if I ever have to be revived from being frozen in the Arctic, Haley Atwell can revive me anytime.
Sure. That's a franchise where you can not like what they've done since, but Endgame was a fantastic end.
Yeah. Yes.
Because there were emotional stakes.
Yeah. And again, those are storylines that, because of the natural ongoing nature of them, we did need closure. So that way when Sam does show up as Captain America, we're not all confused and we have a real reason for thinking it. I didn't need to have this movie tied to the events of the first film, but it does.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things I needed, as everyone knows, George Wendt passed away this week. And that is a big loss to the comedy community, big loss to people of a certain age and parts of what they watched growing up.
Yeah.
And so Paramount Plus very rightly has been pushing that they have all the Cheers episodes available.
Yeah.
I've been watching. It's very interesting to me how much better that show was. And I think Cheers is an all-time, you can argue top 5, top 10
sitcom for sure.
All-time sitcom. But how much better it is watching it as a 50 some odd year old adult than it was watching it starting when I was an 11 or 12-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Which I still found it hilarious, but for completely different reasons. There's stuff that really, really hits in there that I just didn't catch. So if you got the time, sit down and watch. They end up being 22-minute episodes because there's no commercials when they're streaming. You can knock out 3 in an hour.
Yeah. Or you can walk out 9 in the time it takes you to watch Mission Impossible.
That's right. And I think you'd find it was time better spent, frankly.
Probably would. Yeah. It's funny is Jess and I ended up, somebody did a maxi cut of every time Norm walks in for like all 11 seasons. We watched that the other day, but I was thinking about this. One of my favorite written episodes of television is The Dinner Party on The Office. And you cannot tell me that those writers didn't watch Woody's Wedding, which was also just wonderfully awkwardly written, and get some level of exposition from that two-parter.
100%.
100%.
Yeah, I think everybody of our generation at least has a certain norm thing that they used in their everyday life. Mine was always women can't live with them, pass the beer nuts. And of course, George Wendt as Norm delivered it much better than I just
Yeah.
did. But every episode, he
Mine is
had
the
one of those.
classic. Mine is the classic dog eat dog world, and I'm wearing milk-bone underwear. But the one
Yeah.
that I think I made that I had never noticed before is when Coach asked him who wants a beer and said, "Yeah, I guess I have to kill some time before my next beer somehow." Like, and the killing the time was his first beer. All right. Well,
I think that's another thing. If you're going to go rewatch Cheers, especially the early episodes, Nicholas Costello, who played Coach, is really an underrated actor.
underrated. Yeah.
And I think there's a certain time in an actor's life where you find the part that is you, and it's not really acting anymore. You're just allowed to be yourself within those walls a little bit. That was him. And that was the show was not worse or better after he passed, but it was definitely different because he brought an entirely different energy than what Woody Harrelson would eventually bring to Woody Boyd. And that's all good. And I love those episodes too. But these early episodes with Coach is kind of like wrapping yourself in a warm blanket. It's a lot of fun.
What I love about that, and I know we're over time, but one of my favorite aspects of that show was the last thing Sam Malone does in the finale is straighten the picture of Geronimo, which of course was in Coach's dressing room, and they moved it to the set after he died. It just shows you just how tight that group was, despite the fact that Shelley Long thought she was way bigger than the show.
Well, I'll throw you one better than that. That same picture made its way to the set of Ted Lasso because May adjusts it in the series finale of Ted Lasso.
I do remember that. I remember having a conniption and Jessica going, "What the hell are you doing? What are you going to do?" All right. Well, that does wrap us up. Now, next week, it might be weird. You might have to do the show by yourself.
Next week I'll be in Hawaii, so it'll be really early in the morning too.
Okay. I thought you were in Hawaii a week after. Anyway.
No, yeah. we leave on the 4th.
Okay, so maybe I'll jump in and do it by myself so you don't have to wake up. But then we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Either way.
If the Astros have lost games to the A's, I might not want to talk about it. So
yeah. There will be some content for off day, coming soon. Until then, for Andy, I'm Jim. Have a great rest of your weekend and a good week.
Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get